Whenever you begin to think about man and the nature of man, to be in his image, just as God was a moral being, so we are moral beings. The fact that we know right from wrong, the fact that we have a conscience and can feel guilty or can feel like we've done the right thing. Conscience is not always negative, sometimes it's positive. The fact that we have that is because God has given us that ability. We wouldn't be able to do it if God had not given us that ability, but we need to go one step farther and recognize that we have a moral governor. We wouldn't be able to have morality if God had not planted within our hearts, in our spirits, a moral right and wrong. We wouldn't have it. There is a God, and one of the great arguments for the existence of God is just man, not only him physically, but also spiritually and morally. However, the Lord created the world in 6 days, resting on the seventh. Clearly, this point is intended to instruct the Israelites in the time of Moses to imitate God's behavior in working for 6 days and then resting on the seventh. And of course, this is mentioned in Exodus 20. While we may not always have the insight to understand God's plan, he always acts in the interest of his people. And the world truly is the perfect environment, really, for soul making and soul winning too. We become God's people, God's men, God's women because of the order and the teaching and the instruction that we receive from God. And I'm thankful that he teaches us. If you look at the intellectual hierarchy in creation, from the beginning of creation, there is an implicit hierarchy that is established. While we believe evolution to be false, the Bible does not indicate that creation proceeded from most basic to most complex forms of life. It does indicate, I'm sorry, I misread that. The Bible does indicate that creation proceeded from the most basic to the most complex forms of life. That is true. But it didn't over millions of years. It happened in God's way. The purpose of this procedure is not to allow billions of years for life to develop, but rather to demonstrate that God has saved the best for last. Now, the fundamental necessity of life is sunlight. Plants are nourished by the rays of the sun. However, neither is intelligent. The sun and the moon are not intelligent. The one who made them is, but not them. And plant life has no intelligence. That is, it doesn't think. They are merely prepared. They merely prepare the world for the animal creation. Now, animals possess a bit of an intelligent, quasi-rational mind. Animals have a little more ability to have some kind of reasoning or some kind of that. They know when they're hungry and they learn to hunt. They act according to instinct. They can be trained and remember. If you've ever had a dog that's been trained and the master speaks to the dog does what it's supposed to do. I saw some dogs that were owned by a man who had several sheep, and he made certain sounds, and those dogs knew exactly what to do because they had been trained to follow those particular sounds. And when he would speak to them, he could get those sheep to do whatever he wanted them to do. James talks about how all animals are subject to man. They can respond also to maltreatment. You ever have a dog that gets pinned up and roped and beat a lot? Let me tell you what, that dog learns to fight. And in Oklahoma, we have chicken fights where you get chickens who fight each other. Well, those chickens have been trained to fight. And of course, people gamble over it. That's the reason why they get trained. Well, that's a bad thing. but they represent a development in intelligence. They have some intelligence that brings life closer to consciousness, but not quite the place where we have consciousness in humans. The final created being is man, and man is greater than animals in terms of intelligence and rational thought. He is like God in that sense. As the final created being, man is one step below God. His image, made in his image, signifies that man receives a divine element that is distinctive among created beings. The creation of man at the last implies that he is the crown of creation. And all created reality prior to the creation of man was preparing for man's entrance into the world. God didn't just put a man down and then try to make the world fit it. No, he first built the world and then made man. And so man is supreme in both intelligence and authority. When we think about being made in the image of God, there's a lot of other factors that come into that. Let's look at these implications of creation. Number one is that is the idea that creation indicates, first of all, that God has all power. Now, contrasting the Almighty with idols, Jeremiah wrote, "It is He who made the earth by His power." In fact, creation confirms God's unique deity excludes all basis for idolatry. Now, an idol was made by man. It never was a God capable of making anything. No idol ever made anything. No idol ever taught. No idol ever heard your prayer. No idol could ever make a difference in things. And God, of course, is greater than the idols. The Lord made the heavens. Indeed, God has a prior claim on his creation. The psalmist wrote, "The earth is the Lord and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it." Very clear, very, very clear. Moreover, creation verifies that God is all wise. The Lord, by wisdom, founded the earth. By understanding, he established the heavens. And you have Proverbs 3:19 and Jeremiah 10:12 and other passages. So the creation really reveals God's glory and his wisdom and his power. Creation also implies specific things about men. It suggests, for instance, the dignity of human life. Man has been created in the very image of God, and he is superior to the animal creation, having been crowned with glory and majesty by God. Subsequently, creation stresses the sacredness of human life. Now, let me tell you something. A person can go out and can kill a chicken and pluck it and cook it and eat it, but you can't do that to a man. You know, animals, of course, can be used for food, but not man. He is distinct as an intelligent creature made in the image of God. And when you kill a man, you have killed something that was sacred in the mind of God. Yes, Nathan.
Oh, well, the implications, going back to the first part about the nature and the relationships of God. I think me and you had talked about it because I told you I found it and you want to know where I found it at. Hester Publications has it. And in the book of Genesis, a guy, one of the greatest students of the Bible, and you had the privilege of getting to know him pretty well, Brother Hugo McCord.
Yes.
Wrote the book Getting Acquainted with God, and it's the 35 different deities of God contained within the Old Testament.
Mm. I'll need to check with Sam one of these days and see if I
Oh,
can't get a copy of that book.
yeah, they're $7. I
Okay.
just looked on their website.
Well, I'll have to check that one out. I think it would be very valuable. When we think about the statement, "Whoever sheds man's blood," this is Genesis 9, verse 6. God said to Noah and his sons, "Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man." Now, I tell you what, I've known some folks that were mighty wicked and mighty immoral that that needed to be punished, needed to be put to death, but it was not my right to do that just because I got mad at him or I didn't like him. Now, the governments are given the sword, Romans chapter 13. But you and me, we're not given a sword. We don't have the right to take someone else's life intentionally. You shall not murder is a part of the scriptures. To murder means you made the decision. You were angry, or you, for one reason or another, decided somebody had no right to live and you killed him. That's murder. It's murder. And a man is not to do that. And in the book of Revelation, when you get into chapters 21 and chapter 22, and it talks about who's going to be able to enter the city of the city that God has for his people in heaven. And it won't be murderers, people who do that. At creation, man was granted dominion over the world. For thus says the Lord, who created the heavens. He's the God who formed the earth and made it, established it, and did not create it a waste place, but formed it to be inhabited. And then he said, I am the Lord and there's no one else. And of course, this is an important thing. Whenever you begin to think about man and the nature of man, to be in his image, just as God was a moral being, so we are moral beings. The fact that we know right from wrong, the fact that we have a conscience and can feel guilty or can feel like we've done the right thing. Conscience is not always negative, sometimes it's positive. The fact that we have that is because God has given us that ability. We wouldn't be able to do it if God had not given us that ability, but we need to go one step farther and recognize that we have a moral governor. We wouldn't be able to have morality if God had not planted within our hearts, in our spirits, a moral right and wrong. We wouldn't have it. There is a God, and one of the great arguments for the existence of God is just man, not only him physically, but also spiritually and morally.